Hey, how's it going, everyone? Thanks for joining me on a new episode of the Music Reviewer Podcast. My name is Josh, and thanks for joining me on a new episode of Best and Worst Track of the Week. The week of January 23rd, so definitely deep into the month now of the new year. Pretty interesting week. This is the week that, in my opinion, kind of feels like the most new year of the bunch. It features an album bomb from an album that was released this year by Morgan Wallen. And yeah, a lot of variety in here, some curveballs. And if you're new to Best and Worst Track of the Week, thanks for joining. All Best and Worst Track of the Week is me taking all new entries into the Billboard Hot 100 and giving each a letter grade, taking one that's the worst, taking one that's the best. That's all it is. I also do album reviews most of the time. Recently dropped one, actually, for the latest Shame album, Drunk Tank Pink, Shame, the UK post-punk band. If you're interested in that, check out that album. Also check out the review. Just posted it on YouTube as well if you're wanting to do that. But yeah, look for more album reviews coming down the pipeline. I know I took a brief break on them, but we're kind of back in business now. But anyways, I would be lying to you if I said I was pretty hyped up for covering this week's episode, especially because of the Morgan Wallen album bomb. Kind of made this episode a bit lengthy, and I was on the fence of even reviewing it, giving it a full album review as well, but I don't know what's up with his label and their decisions, and the also the timing of the release. It feels like Morgan Wallen should have released an album in the summer, especially because of the brand of country he seems to excel in. But he released a double album, not just a single album, a double album with 30 tracks with a runtime of an hour and 37 minutes. I'm not against someone putting out a double album or making their album a little bit lengthy. But I'll be frank. This album had a lot of filler on it. And, yeah, it definitely could have used some trimming. And I guess I'm happy I went and reviewed the tracks that made it onto the Hot 100, because I kind of got a better sense of where Morgan Wallen is going and what he was maybe trying to do on this album. And once I start coming to tracks, I'll kind of make it apparent what my ideas are. But anyways, yeah, he wasn't entirely what this episode is about, so don't be taken aback by me talking about him just now. In terms of highlights into the Hot 100, we have a new number one. The song is titled Driver's License by Olivia Rodrigo. We'll get into that, but super interesting how good this song is doing. But also we have Mood by 24kGoldn and Ian Dior down to number 2. I don't really know the data of how well Driver's License is doing, but I wouldn't be surprised if Ian Dior went and took number 1 again next week. But who knows? Driver's License might be around to stay for the long run. And then also in like the top 10, H.ER with Bang up to number 8. So they did move one spot from last week. They are still winning that slow but steady race. I have no idea how much gas they have left in the tank, but that is really impressive. This song has been on the charts since like early summer last year. So yeah, it looked at like some points it was about to die, but yeah, they're still hanging on and doing quite well. Good Days by SZA at number 10. This track came out like 2 weeks ago. I'm still digging it. Probably one of the more solid tracks in recent memory. Glad to see it increasing. Maybe it'll be a super hit for her, which I think she's probably definitely worthy of. Some other noteworthy moments. Therefore I Am by Billie Eilish dropped down to 17. That looks like it might be losing some traction. So it might not be the next big hit that Eilish was probably hoping for. Save Your Tears by The Weeknd with a big jump up to 21. I think that's mainly because of a music video drop. But who knows? It might get some more traction with the Super Bowl coming up in a few weeks. Anyone by Justin Bieber, a track that I believe dropped a couple weeks ago, down to number 22. So yeah, don't know if that's definitely going to last for him, but I thought it was one of the better tracks he's released in recent memory. Unfortunately, one of our worst tracks of the week, Good Time by Nico Moon, went up to 44 this week. This one has also been slowly but steadily climbing. I really don't see the appeal of this, but I can understand why it might be doing well on Nashville radio, country radio. But yeah, I really don't want to see this get any higher. Also, Midnight Sky by Miley Cyrus seems like it's about to drop out. It's at 98 this week. We'll see. It might have a couple more weeks left. And then also Pretty Heart by Parker McCollum, one of our best tracks of the week. Unfortunately dropped out this week. I think it's probably safe to say it's done. Also, in terms of last week, Hell of a View by Eric Church dropped out. Kind of surprised to see it dying so quickly. I don't really think Eric Church is really getting much out of Nashville these days. And then also our best track last week, Heat Waves by Glass Animals, our unsuspecting, chart entry dropped out. So unfortunately, that looks like it's dead as well. So RIP to that moment in time. But yeah, that's pretty much those highlights I found to be interesting on the chart. But let's go ahead and get into the gist of the music this week. First track coming in at 95 is Girl Like Me, featuring H.ER and Jazmine Sullivan. I wasn't too knowledgeable at all on who Jazmine Sullivan is prior to reviewing her tracks this week, and it looks like she's just a R&B artist with a bit of a tenure in her career, but she's not super well known. She's been around since like 2008, it appears, but she's just not like on the level of like the better well-known R&B artists, for instance, like SZA or Jhené Aiko. But this track was interesting. I wasn't a fan immediately off the bat with the guitar sample that structures this track. It's just very loopy and it sounds a bit cheap. But her vocals really are quite lovely. I'd say that's a saving grace of this track. And there's also a lovely warm bass accompaniment that adds a nice touch as well. And there's also these chirpy sampled embellishments that make the track a little bit more interesting. My issue is the feature by H.ER, H.ER. She just goes in way too abrupt and belty. She's just kind of over singing. And it ruins like the sensitive nature and smooth, vibe that was going on before she entered. And she just kind of ruined the overall color that this track had going for it. And it's just, it was just too contrasting and abrupt. So unfortunately, I didn't dig the track as much as I wanted to. So I give it a C. Next track was, first one coming off of the Morgan Wallen album, Bomb 93, Wondering About the Wind. This is a track that sounds a bit Chris Stapleton-like, especially in the opening instrumental. There's a rich and organic acoustic guitar guiding the track, and I do dig the drum work that's going on here and how it provides a nice groove in the track overall, and there's some really nice hi-hat work as well. But, and sometimes in the production, especially with the percussion on a lot of these Morgan Wallen tracks, there's just some weird stuff going on. In this track, the snare sounds a bit buried at times, like it fluctuates between loud and soft or like dull. It's really interesting, and I will say this track does have some interesting and intricate electric guitar elements later in the latter part of the track that really adds some nice flavor to it, so I give this track a B. Next track was This Bar by Morgan Wallen at 92. This track just has some similarities to maybe some more sentimental tracks you'd expect from like Florida Georgia Line. Morgan's performance here just doesn't sound convincing. There's not as much grit as I'd like, in my opinion. In my opinion, part of the reason what makes Morgan Wallen so special at times is the grit he provides to tracks and his personality. I just don't really get that here. And this track kind of has like a strong writing style you'd expect from like Dierks Bentley as well. I know earlier I said Florida Georgia Line. Dierks Bentley is also another good example. I think a track from him like I Hold On, just not presented with nearly the same effect as that song. So I give this track a C. Next track was from Morgan Wallen as well, coming in at 90. This time featuring Chris Stapleton. This track's titled Only Thing That's Gone. Immediately, I noticed on this track that the drum track is just a bit distracting with the overwhelming snare on here. it kind of takes away the charm from Wallen and Chris Stapleton's vocals. That's a huge issue right there. But I will say when Chris does come in on his feature, he makes the track immediately better. I do like the pacing of the track as well. It provides some nice transitions to the choruses that make the track have a nice payoff. And I really dig the organic acoustic elements as well that are presented in this track. And but in my opinion, the track is just really ruined by that overbearing drum track that honestly sounds, in my opinion, a bit cheap too. So I give the track a C. Next track was Outlaw featuring Ben Burgess by Morgan Wallen at 84. So in terms of the feature, it looks like Ben Burgess is up and coming in the country scene. I don't think he's ever really been featured or had a huge hit, but it looks like he wrote Whiskey Glasses for Morgan Wallen, and he's just got his first major record deal. So, but he looks like he kind of strikes me as being part of like a more of a outlaw country or Texas country scene, especially with the way he sings. It looks like he's from Texas as well. But this track really doesn't sound complete or stable until like the second verse when Burgess does come in and he's introduced. And that's also the entry of like percussion and bass on this track. And admittedly, before that, the track was really just not that interesting. Once we get all the elements of the track, it does sound a lot warmer and fuller. And, you know, I can't really pinpoint who Ben Burgess sounds like, but he's a good singer, and I dig him on this track. But the choruses really try to go for a big, passionate sound, but it just sounds a bit forced. The track could use just a little bit more flavor or texture in the instrumental. Instrumental is just very stripped down and uninteresting. You kind of just get the gist of it in the first 30 seconds, and it really just doesn't change much other than when the Burgess is introduced in the second verse. So I gave this track a C-. Next track was from Morgan Wallen at 84, Your Bartender. This track kind of has like that slow burn aesthetic of like a Jason Aldean song with this wobbly sub bass that supports everything. That's pretty characteristic of Aldean's style as well. Some pretty straightforward pop country here. And I think really that just works a lot better for Morgan Wallen in general. With a great example being the previous track that we just talked about, Outlaw. So, yeah, even though this stuff is a little bit more generic and sanitary, Morgan Wallen, it just sounds better on it. He executes it better. The track even has some nice sparkly synth embellishments that make the track a bit more interesting and textured. Another loud drum track on here, but it doesn't really get in the way in this context. And interesting note, Thomas Rhett wrote this as well. It's sounds like that sort of stuff, so I give this track a B. Next track was Whiskeyed My Way from Morgan Wallen at 83. There's a compound time signature with this ballad nature on here. The track has a bit of like a filler nature to it in the context of the album. Kind of sounds like it's going for like the sad and miserable nature of like a 90s country track, but without like the sincereness of a 90s country track. But I do like the rich instrumental bits where we hear some like slide guitar or like a small melodic guitar line thrown in. That's really all this track has going for it, so I gave it a C+. Next track was More Surprised Than Me by Morgan Wallen at 66. I dig the soft auxiliary percussion that's in the intro of this track, and it goes along quite well with like the plucked guitars that kind of structure this track as well. And the track has a lot of filler to it as well. It just sounds very middle of the road, and there are rich guitar lines that structure everything that really stand out, but the songwriting and the structure of the track are just a bit snoozy or as expected, so I give this track a C. Next track was Neon Eyes by Morgan Wallen at 63. Back to the pop country aesthetics here, but holy reverb on his voice there. It's a bit distracting. It sounds very echoey, but I do like the melodic bass line that peeks through at times on here. And even though this is a pretty generic or fitting of a typical Nashville country at this point in time, Morgan Wallen again he just executes this very well. It's like he was made for it. There's even a nice little like hazy and slidey guitar bit that's brought in the second chorus that kind of gives this track a cool effect that's utilized throughout the rest of the song from that point, and it makes the track a lot more interesting, so I gave it a B. Next track was Dangerous by Morgan Wallen at 62. I like how quickly this track gets to the point. It doesn't really beat around the bush. There's some fitting melodic guitar lines that embellish the track quite nicely, and some weird auxiliary percussion that's thrown in that has like this zipper sound effect that I found was a weird choice. Just pretty straightforward and poppy. Doesn't try to do too much. That's not a sin, so I give that a B minus. Next track was 865 by Morgan Wallen, 46. Mid-tempo track here. Dig the warm and full sound the bass provides on here. It's a song about a Nashville area code, something like that. Knoxville, Tennessee. I love the drum track on this track. The snare hits kind of crescendo and it gives the track a nice effect. A nice balance between like pop country and like the outlaw acoustic country stuff he's been going for on the album. So I thought this was an interesting track. I gave it a B. Next track was Warning by Morgan Wallen at 42. I like the effect-driven guitar riffs on this track. Kind of sounds like new wave, Edge from the U2 like. But the track also has like this trappish R&B elements to it, like the simmering Jason Aldean vibe on here again. And again, Morgan Wallen does this stuff a lot better than when he's trying to go for like the other, acoustic country Chris Stapleton stuff. And I love the blending of this deep sub bass on the track. It's balanced quite well. Some bright keyboard elements that color the track nicely as well. It's a short track, but I give it a B. Next track is Sand in My Boots by Morgan Wallen at 32. This is a down-tempo ballad that is structured with this very rich grand piano. This is either like one of the first songs or the first song on the album, so it's kind of how the album's introduced. It definitely hits the check marks of a typical country album. He definitely hits on he's from a small town, cowboy metaphors, also a line about a truck. Kind of sounds like a ripoff of Luke Combs' aesthetic, honestly. It just sounds like a track written for Luke Combs. There are some held out chords on the electric guitar elements that are a bit indistinct in terms of the mix, especially in parts like the chorus. That part kind of bothered me. But still the track is executed pretty well. It's one of the better ones I've heard on this album, so I give it a B. The next track is not by Morgan Wallen. It is Best Friend by Saweetie featuring Doja Cat at 39. The track is very fun and upbeat. I like that. And there's a crisp trap beat on here with this bouncy feel. In terms of lyrical content, it's literally a song about hyping up your best friend, telling them they're the shit. The main dry and melodic loop sample can be a bit static and repetitive, but there could have been a little bit more texture on the beat overall, but it's not bad. It's a fun track. Not too much to it. I give it a B. Next track was Wasted on You by Morgan Wallen, coming in at number 9. I like the pretty opening guitar work and the chord progression that's thrown on here. There's an excellent transition and drop into the chorus that I dig, and it goes into like this pop country Jason Aldean thing that with that trap beat, and Morgan Wallen does this well again. And I love the warmth and timing of the bass on this track as well. Nice mini guitar solo right past the second chorus that makes the track a little bit nicer. I give it a B. And our number 1 track this week, Driver's License by Olivia Rodrigo. This track is, I haven't heard something like this in quite some time on like the Hot 100. I don't really know anything about her other than she's like a Disney Channel star or former Disney Channel star from like a High School Musical spin-off. You know what, I'll be frank. Immediately I hate the generic piano instrumental with like these cheap percussive elements on top of it that are supposed to sound like hand claps. Also, there's this annoying use of this one note played over and over on the piano in an 8th note pattern for majority of the song that just kind of feels unnecessary and uninteresting. The chord progression and the chord structure was fine to begin with the piano. And I hate these annoying kick drum hits that start on the second verse. They're incredibly bland and by the numbers. But she does provide a great vocal performance on here, especially in the moments where she does go for the belting. It works quite well. But everything else about the track, the synths sound super cheap when they appear. The sub bass on here is pretty ineffective and distracting, abrupt at times. But really what strikes me as interesting on this track is when it builds up to like that bridge moment where we get this gang vocal moment that the track builds up to, it really strikes me quite similar to Lana Del Rey's Ultraviolence, like the aesthetic she goes for on there with the big vocal moments where it sounds like sung in falsetto. Taylor Swift has done stuff like that as well. It definitely seems like she's taking from that directly and enhancing her song that way, but I don't really know too much about her music to really know if that's really what she is into doing. But to me, it sounds like a bit of a ripoff, unfortunately. And really, the track, in my opinion, just doesn't go anywhere past predictable piano-centric singer-songwriter stuff. Vocally, she's there. I think she's a very good vocalist, but I'm not too excited to see what else she writes because I don't know if she has a distinct sound to her. But anyways, I gave this track a C-. And yeah, we're to that point in the episode where I give you the best and worst track. We'll start on the worst track, so we leave on a positive note. The worst track this week was by Erica Banks, Bust It, at 100. This is my opinion, is what I do not like about the state of hip-hop right now, where you're pandering to an audience that just wants to hear a hook that was very popular at one point in time. In this situation, Nelly's It's Getting Hot in Here, and trying to get the masses to think that that makes the track good. But yeah, and also Erica Banks, granted I'm not familiar with her music, although I did hear one other track from her when I was reviewing this, or when I was writing the review, and it seems like she goes for this formula of sampling, popular songs on the hook on her other tracks. So, yeah, but in my opinion, what really makes this even worse is that she copies Megan Thee Stallion's persona, aesthetic, her rapping skills, the flow's the same, the ad-libs are the same, the cadences are the same, and yeah, it's super unoriginal, it's pandering, the mix is disgusting, it's exceedingly overblown on that sub bass, and it's annoyingly smeared across everything, and it makes it sound like it's competing against Erica on her vocals, which really shouldn't be the case. And her voice and presence just sounds lifeless as well. It's robotic. So, yeah, I don't really know what there is to extract from here other than that this is a pretty bad song, and I really pray that it does not become a hit. Best track of the week, on the other hand, is Streets by Doja Cat. This was a surprise. This is probably one of the better or best Doja Cat song I've ever heard. This one came in at 91. Really, I'd say this is a good usage of, an effective usage of turned up sub bass. It gives the track a warm nature to it, and it just supports everything. And also, this track kind of has some interesting elements, like a lo-fi drum track, or a lo-fi-like drum track, and some subtle electronic embellishments that kind of just make the track, more colorful and interesting. It kind of gives me some similarity to maybe an artist like Benny. I can see this being a song that would be similar to what she does. And I dig the light and whispering vocals that fit in on this track quite well. And it just gives the track an overall vibe. I haven't really heard Doja Cat in this context, but it's really quite nice. And her rap verse is honestly quite good, in my opinion. She switches up her flow. She has a nice and convincing presence and attitude to her. And she actually raps, with some skill. And probably no one will know who this artist is, but it reminds me a lot of this rap duo that was in the early 2010s that I liked, called Rat King from New York. She raps a lot in the way one of the rappers in that group did. And it's a very interesting way of rapping. A very, agile and way of, enunciating things. If you ever want to check out the group, I'd highly recommend their debut album, and I think that's the only thing they ever did. But overall, the track just has some really dark colors on here. It gives the track a really nice dark aesthetic that you can kind of get lost in. very lenient on like the all R&B side of things too. I can kind of see it like maybe like a Jhené Aiko sort of thing going on too. So I give this track best track of the week. Dig it. And yeah, if you stuck with me to the end of this episode, thanks. I will be covering some more music soon. My name is Josh. If you're on your respective streaming service, if you dig the episode, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. Leave some feedback, good or bad. But take care of yourselves. I'll see you all later.